Here's our 2011 Jeep Compass, and the reason I have this back wheel pulled off is because there is a really annoying squeak coming from the rear end, and I'm trying to trace it. And I don't know if the struts are bad. That could be a possibility because we're also having this issue where on the highway, if we hit kind of a bigger bump, the rear end tends to sway. So there may actually be an issue with these struts as well. The vehicle has 111,000 miles, so can't really rule anything out. But looking underneath here, recently, a couple months ago, the dealership replaced this rear cross member, which is this guy right here. And that's actually what houses the differential and all the suspension components. So I live in the Northeast, and there's a current warranty out that this rusts out very badly, and it's a safety concern. So the dealership actually replaced both the front and the rear. And if you have a Jeep Compass, I highly recommend taking a look at it, getting your dealer to inspect it, and if it's 10 years older or less, then it should be covered under warranty. But basically, with this cross member, they ended up replacing the control arms, this guy here, this guy, sway bar bushings, and the sway bar end links right there. But we're still getting a squeak, and the reason is, or at least I believe so, is that this is what's called the trailing arm, and it is the original with the original bushing. So let me crawl up underneath here and show you what I think is causing the noise. So here's that bushing. There's everything else to the rear suspension. But I think this is the bushing in question. So some deflection with this bushing is normal. I don't know that this is abnormal, but it kind of has more play than I would like. And then also, it's probably hard to pick up on the camera, but it does get a little squeak. And I imagine with the wheels back on it, the vehicle weight on it, it kind of amplifies that noise. So these bushings are cheap. I got them on Rock Auto for $25 shipped to my door. So let me show you what we'll be replacing it with. So these are what we'll be replacing it with. K201404 by Moog. Dorman makes a similar product, but I've had relatively good luck with Moog, so I figured I would stick with them. So this is what you get. If you don't have the part number, you can just Google trailing arm bushing for a Jeep Compass, and like parts will come up, and of course Mopar, the original equipment, will pop up as well. But I like Moog. It's a good aftermarket brand, and they got a pretty good customer service. So this is what we'll be replacing it with. We got 2 of those from Rock Auto, and of course you can find them at any local parts store for the most part. And then what you'll need is what's called a ball joint press. One of these guys that does ball joints, control arm bushings, trailing arm bushings, all sorts of stuff. You get all these cups and stuff, and it's $270 some to rent. Don't really recommend buying it unless you're an actual mechanic, but here's what you get, $270 some. But once you're done, you return it, you get all of your money back. So it's just a lot of money up front, but all it is a deposit, and you got all the stuff that you need. They make a smaller kit, but I definitely recommend getting the more expensive, larger one, because you have a lot more variation in the cups and stuff. But this whole kit, those 2 bushings, a little bit of effort and elbow grease, and it should be good to go. So let's get to changing it. For starters, we're going to take out this emergency brake cable bracket. It's a 13 millimeter. It's not necessarily required, but it gives us more access to get to the actual trailing arm bushing bolt. So there you got better access. Get your 15 millimeter. Get up in there. So now this is loose, and there's still not enough room to press this out. So the goal is We're gonna get some blocks of wood, stick it in this void here, and hopefully lower this down a bit to get access to use the press. So the best trick to lowering this down after you unbolt it is to get another floor jack. Now, the vehicle is secured. I do have jack stands underneath here, and then as like a third point, I do have another jack keeping light tension here, so it's kind of triangulated. So this is not supporting the weight of the vehicle, just so you know. But get another floor jack, jack up underneath your wheel, and it'll actually pivot this trailing arm down, and then get like something like a block of wood, wedge it in between the trailing arm and the rear cross member, and be careful because there's brake lines. Whenever you lower this section, this tabs out what bolts it to the actual frame. Be careful because there's actually a fuel line right here. If you're not paying attention, this can get hung up on it. But once you lower that down, have it secured, this should provide enough access to get the press in there. If not, I'll probably add one more block of wood, a little bit thinner, to lower it down. But here is what I'm talking about. So some play is normal, but not this much. Couple options here. Use the press tool, knock this thing out. Not a lot of room with the tank there. You can also burn this out. Get a propane torch, oxyacetylene, something to cook the rubber joint out, and then cut it out, do whatever. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take the easy way out. Use the Sawzall. Stick it in like such. Cut it ever so slightly through here. Knock it out with the hammer, but you want to make sure you don't go too far because you'll actually cut into the trailing arm, and that is no bueno. So let's give this a cut, a couple whacks, knock this thing out. We'll be ready to press the new one in. Next up, get something like a Dremel or with a grinding wheel to get in here and clean the edges up. Knock out that rust. Spray something like WD-40 all on that to lube it up. Let's grab the bushing and tap it in place so we get enough room to press it in. Otherwise, it's kind of too much of a thickness. It has to be seated just a smidge before we actually use the press. So the orientation does matter. You want to kick it a little bit forward. We're going to get the hammer, tap around the back side evenly as possible, and then that way we'll be able to get the press in here, hammer it in, and be done. there you have it. Unfortunately, it's not a direct step how-to, but hopefully this video kind of gave you some insight on some of the symptoms and some of the solutions for this trailing arm. The hardest part by far is figuring out which collars you need to press in the bushing. Getting it out is not that difficult. I just like to use a Sawzall. Here's the old one. And I run the Sawzall. Actually, it's in there like this, so I ran the Sawzall through here, making sure I didn't go too deep into the actual trailing arm, but basically just creating a relief cut, and then you're able to hammer this out. Not a lot of room to get this, because you actually would have to reverse it like this, and then the gas tank sits right there, so not a lot of room. So best thing to do, at least in my opinion, well, I wouldn't say the best thing, but easiest thing in my opinion is just to get a Sawzall, cut a relief cut, hammer this out, and you're good to go. But yes, hardest part, figuring out these stupid collars. So if you don't want to finagle with the actual trailing arm bushing, unpressing it, do yourself a favor and replace this entire thing. Now the trailing arm bushings got them for 25 bucks off Rock Auto. This entire arm is available. I don't know on Rock Auto, but I did see it online. It's like 250, 270 bucks, but with that, you're unbolting all of these control arms, the strut, assembly, brake caliper, rotor, hub, all of this stuff. So it's just a matter of what you find more labor intensive. Pressing this in and out, pain in the butt, but it'll save you in the long run. So hopefully this video helped you out. Obviously not a, direct step-by-step how-to, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what you'd get into in some of the symptoms. So appreciate you watching. If it helped you out, be sure to like, subscribe. I have plenty of other videos, some other Jeep Compass stuff, and thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.